Well, hi, folks, and welcome to episode 3 of Naturally Adventurous. I'm Ken Barrens, and I'm joined by my good friend Charley Hess. We're both international tour guides for tropical birding. It's one of the world's biggest tour companies, and so it's given us chances to have lots of adventures all around the world. I think we started doing these things on our own, and then we eventually joined tropical birding and got to go to even more cool places that way. And so today we are going to continue Charley's top 10 list of lifetime bird sightings, which is very gripping for me. This is even more gripping than the bottom 5. It's painful, but
should be.
Hopefully it'll be entertaining for folks. Just a couple things we want to mention before we kick off the top 5. Let's see. We mentioned last week that we were both writing things for Cornell. To be specific about that, what we're writing for is for the Merlin App that Cornell is doing. This is a really cool app that's completely free. It covers, right now it covers about 2/3 of the world. Eventually it's going to cover every country on Earth. There's photos, vocalizations, some excellent text written by people like us. At least we try for excellent text. And then the really cool thing about Merlin is that there's a sort of an AI bird identification feature there where you can put in a photo and then it will give you ideas of what it might be. A really cutting edge thing. So definitely recommend that to folks. And the price is right. It's free.
I've been doing, during COVID, I've been doing quite a bit of birding with my son, as those that have me on social media will have seen. But I've also taken little groups of kids out birding. And the Merlin app is particularly good for using with children. Getting people into birding doesn't require any previous knowledge. You know, you put in the size of the bird and the color and, you know, where it is on a wire or in a bush. And it gives you a sort of a set of photos that you can choose between. So it's a really nice way to get people into birding.
It looks to me like a great way to study too for a trip. It's kind of like those playlists you used to do on iTunes where you have vocalizations and then you plug in photos. So it's sort of all done for you already. Definitely going to use it on future trips. Just a couple other quick things to mention. Every single podcast in the world asks people to review them on iTunes, and now I understand why. It's actually very useful when you're trying to get a podcast off the ground to have some reviews on Apple podcasts. So if you like the show and you're willing to give us a review, that would be awesome. We'll maybe put the link in the show description. And then one more thing I'll mention before I start running through Charley's top 5 is my story last week about looking for sharpbill in the foothills of the Bolivian Andes. At some point, we were camped up at the ranger station in the middle of nowhere, and a ranger came along. And he was a little concerned that we were there in the middle of nowhere without any kind of local guide or anything. But the thing that most shocked him, I remember this after the episode, was that there were no women there to cook for us. And he actually, this was no joke.
No hay mujeres.
No hay mujeres.
¿Dónde mujeres?
And he was thinking that we were actually going to be starving to death and that they were going to find us, just desiccated corpses in this old ranger station because we had no one to cook for us. And then we actually ended up making him lunch one of our little dry bread avocado sardine sandwiches. And he kind of nodded approvingly and he said, muy practical. So that was just...
I think mujeres might have known that you can't boil eggs and keep them for a week. Okay, but
they might have been más practical about the huevos, but it's okay. So,
and there's one more thing before we start as well, Ken, which is we want to just give a little mention to our virtual tours that we've been doing over these last few months. Obviously, we haven't been able to guide tours, so we've been trying to share our knowledge and passion for birds around the world with you by doing these videos, which are well worth watching.
And looking through your top 5, almost all of them are covered by some sort of virtual tour, so maybe we'll mention some of those as we go along.
Definitely.
But we can kick things off with one of the gripping ones, which is Charley's number 5 out of his top 10 lifetime bird sightings is Crested Ibis or Japanese, or what is it called?
Sometimes people call it Japanese Crested Ibis. The Latin name is actually Nipponia nippon,
Oh, cool.
which is pretty cool. But it actually occurs in China as well. So yeah, I think Crested Ibis is a better... Sometimes people call it Asian Crested Ibis as well, I think, because there is, of course, a Madagascan Crested Ibis.
Yeah, I think that's why I've been so keen to see this bird, because sometimes you actually want to see close relatives, and that Madagascar ibis is just so cool. But it's actually a lot more common than this Asian one, right? This one is really not very common.
Yeah, I'll tell you all about it.
Please do.
So it's a bit of a long story. So those that know me will know I have a strong connection with Japan, and yeah, I've always had a real fascination for East Asia, especially Japan. And after university, I had student debts, and the thought of getting a poorly paid biological job, it wasn't great. So I thought I'd maybe go somewhere, make a bit of money, learn a language. I've been studying Japanese for a couple of years already. So I went to work in Japan as an English teacher, and this was back in probably about 98, I think, 1998. And I really fell in love with the place. I mean, it's just, it's hard to explain, why do you like it so much? It just feels magical to me. And when I was there working as an English teacher, I got an English language newspaper. I think it was called the Japan Times. And they had mainly things about Japan, a bit of world news. But one thing I noticed they were covering was a story about the Japanese Crested Ibis. And I'll tell you a little bit of history about the bird. It was once found right across East Asia, from Taiwan, Korea, China, and Japan. And I think it was basically the change in rice cultivation that really finished off this species. It used to be, like 100 years ago or whatever. I think it was fairly widespread. But
it's more of an open country bird than a forest bird, right? The Madagascar one is a real forest ibis. Is this one sort of in both habitats?
What it forages in rice fields basically, and it nests and roosts in trees. So it's got to be a place that has a combination of both sort of trees and rice fields. Anyway, so they changed the rice cultivation, because originally you would flood a rice field plant and then you would keep it flooded for like the whole season. But then they made strains of rice that could sort of survive in drier. You'd flood them initially and then sort of let them dry out. And then, of course, they can't catch fish and frogs and things like that. So their food just disappeared. And then there was the use of pesticides and things, and then concreting of water channels, and the whole thing just meant that that they couldn't feed. So they got rarer and rarer. And I think the last wild birds in Japan, they went down to 6 birds on an island in Japan called Sado. And you can see all about this story in my latest virtual tour that's about Okinawa and Sado. And they went down to 6 individuals, and these were they were caught and brought into a captive breeding program in 1981. And it was basically a failure. They didn't have any breeding success of these birds. I think in 1995 the last male died, and as late as I think 2003 the last female died.
Yeesh.
So basically that Japanese population, was finished. It became extinct. Luckily, I think also around 1981, it might have been a bit later, they discovered a population in China, in the mountains of Shanxi province. And it was I think they only found like sort of 7 individuals. And they also started a captive breeding program there, and they had a lot more success. So just after I arrived in Japan in 98, I think in 99, a pair of birds were gifted from the Chinese government to Japan. And they already had a breeding center on Sado Island. But they got these new birds from China. And then they started to have some success. I don't know, maybe they learned some techniques from China or whatever.
Yeah, I wonder what they did differently. I was thinking, what did the Chinese do differently that worked?
I've actually been to this one in China. I was backpacking through China, 20 years ago, and I heard the place they were in, and I turned up there hoping to see some wild birds, but it turned out to be where the breeding center was. So I went to see this breeding center like 20 years ago in Shanxi province. But anyway, however they succeeded, they had a chick, and it hatched, and it was big news in Japan. And I was loving this story. And then they had another pair given from China, and then it's also bred. And then every few months you'd hear another success in the breeding thing. And the idea always was to reintroduce them into the wild at Japan. So this was always like a dream of mine, was to see these wild ibis in Japan. So I stayed in Japan for about 5 years, and then I was traveling and living in different places in South Africa, whatever. And I started guiding in Japan when I started working for tropical birding, and I started doing these Japan tours. And I sort of heard that they'd started re-releasing the birds. I think they build them up to, a couple of hundred birds, and they started releasing them. And this was back in, I think, 2008.
Nervous moments when you start doing that. When you've got these painstakingly sort of hand-reared or whatever, these birds in the wild, man, to start putting them, or in captivity, you've got these painstakingly reared chicks and whatever. What do you do with them? Madagascar poachard has been like that, where they have quite a few in captivity, but each one is so valuable.
But also, have the issues in the wild been solved?
Right,
Are they
Has
going
anything
to
changed?
release them? Are they gonna survive?
Yep.
Anyway, the years went on, and then just finally this year, after I finished my Japan tour, I said I cannot put this off any longer. I need to go and see these birds. So I sort of extended my stay in Japan after the tour for a few days, and I took I think I took an overnight bus, which is cheaper than the train, being from Yorkshire and a little bit.
You don't get out for now.
You don't get out for now. I'm not made of money. Yeah, I took an overnight bus to Niigata from Tokyo. This is up in the northwestern side of the main island of Honshu, the prefecture called Niigata. And there's an island off the coast called Sado. And that's where this breeding center is, and that's where these birds have been re-released. So I went up there and I took a little boat across the water to this place, and I found a nice little Japanese traditional inn. And I had my little tatami room and futon, and it was great. I had a little car, and before I went to see these, I went to the breeding center. And at the breeding center they made an education center about the whole story, and I met a guy there, and he explained the whole thing to me. And you'll see this in my virtual tour. I sort of explain all the conservation issues and what they've done to be able to re-release them onto Sado. They've started making little ponds, little wildlife ponds next to the rice fields, which they keep flooded all year. So you've got your rice field, and then just like a little channel. Yeah, and there's little frogs in there. There's these little long fish, the loaches, and little crabs, and all sorts of. It's like a little wildlife haven. So that has really enabled these birds to forage throughout the year.
And I suppose being on a small island, there maybe are less predators than on the mainland as well.
There are martins and there are foxes, there are issues, but the birds seem to be pretty smart.
They would have historically been adapted to those.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think they manage with a natural predation, but just the food availability is a big thing. Yeah. Another very clever thing they did, because they have all these concrete channels, and they pump with an electric water pump the water up into the rice field. But of course, you've got little fish down in the little creeks. And then, there's no way for them to get into the rice field. So they made these like little ladders that fish could climb. They're like a little set of locks.
Cool.
It's just amazing. And they came up with all these really clever ideas to provide food, and then reducing the amount of pesticides used. And all the local rice farmers, they really got on board with this and really started implementing a lot of these conservation measures. And he told me about this, and I had a real lump in my throat, because when you're into bird conservation, it's just doom and gloom all the time, and everything's bad news, and everything's just spiraling towards extinction. And to hear a real conservation success story was just amazing. It was so heartwarming, and got a lump in my throat again. But anyway, it was great. So I spent some time around there, and got the whole story, and then I took my little hire car and I started driving around looking for these. They're quite a beautiful bird. They're sort of white with a sort of red face and a black bill with a little red tip. But when they fly, they've got this kind of like peachy color with the sort of wing lining, and it's almost like a sort of cherry blossom color, which the Japanese are nuts about.
Like a breeding roseate tern type. bloom.
But they keep this wing lining color throughout the year.
Yeah.
But they actually have a name for this color in Japanese. They call it ibis color, Tokiyo.
Oh wow.
And you see them fly, and this most beautiful like peachy pinky color, just absolutely stunning. Anyway, so when in the non-breeding season and juvenile birds, they have this sort of white color, but they have it when they change into breeding plumage, they get this kind of like dirty gray color. It's bizarre, they go from this beautiful kind of creamy whitish colored thing with a crest, and they're absolutely gorgeous, and then they turn into this really weird kind of sort of slaty gray breeding plumage.
I call that the Cairo cattle egret plumage.
But anyway, so I was driving around, and then I saw this one bird flying, and it just flew in and just sort of landed very close to me. And just as it was landing, I saw this beautiful peachy color. I was just almost in tears. It was just such a big moment. It was like over 20 years I'd waited for this.
Wow.
And then I finally seen this bird.
And 20 years ago, it was unseeable in the wild, basically, right?
Yeah.
So it's something that in that 20 years had come back from the brink.
So it was a huge moment for me, and I spent a whole day driving around, following them, keeping a respectful distance, taking videos and photos and watching them in the field. So I got some video footage, which I put in my virtual tour as well. But it was just such a big thing, and that I'd waited so long for. I think it was a bird that I most wanted to see in the world, like in the wild.
Wow.
And it was a huge moment for me as a birder.
That's cool. I quite like the international cooperation side of this story. It's also a bit optimistic. We just hear all these horrible things about international tensions in South China Sea and especially in East Asia. But just to hear about China giving Japan these precious birds that in some sense are like the patrimony of the world or of Asia, and then Japan, growing their own population. There's something quite inspiring about that. Makes you hope we're capable of doing more of that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few other examples of it in Asia, like the black-faced spoonbill. They do surveys across like 5 countries, and there's Chinese, there's even North Korean biologists that take part in this. So the scope for cooperation is there, and it's very nice when it's achieved.
It's so natural when it comes to nature, because obviously there's no political boundaries when it comes to nature. Yeah,
you're all on the same side.
Yep. It makes me. Your story also makes me wonder. I've been sort of aware of this bird, but I didn't know any of these details, so it's pretty interesting to hear. But it makes me wonder, what was the natural habitat of this bird prior to the massive cultivation of rice?
I mean, rice fields have been there for thousands of years, but of course the bird was there before. But it would have been little marshes and
I suppose there probably would have been a lot of natural wetlands before all the wetlands got converted into rice paddies.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I learned something today, as they say in South Park. So we'll move one up the list to number 4. It's getting intense now as we move up towards big number 1. But Charlie's number 4 lifetime bird sighting is horned guan. In Guatemala or Mexico?
In Guatemala, I saw it, yeah. I mean, this goes beyond just a personal story. I mean, objectively, this is really one of the world's best birds, in my opinion. It's just so unique and
huge, turkey-like, big red projection.
It's just bizarre. It's just one of the weirdest birds, and rare as well. And it's So those that listen to my first 5, I mentioned quite a few birds from South America then. So I did a big birding trip around South America before I became a guide. And this was back, I think, starting in, about 2004. And I was traveling for over 2 years. And I started in Mexico, spent 3 months in Mexico, which is just an incredible birding country.
I love it.
I know you've spent a lot of time there. I think if Ken's Spanish is anything, it's Mexican Spanish.
It's Mexicano, Jalapeno.
Mexicano, way.
Far away.
But great country. So this was a big target of mine, and I heard you could see it in both places, but I heard that you needed to make a real dedicated trip with mules and guides and everything in Mexico, and that you could actually do it yourself in Guatemala. And being on a real tight budget, I decided to go for it in Guatemala rather than Mexico. So I arrived. I spent maybe 2 or 3 weeks in Guatemala. Fantastic country. It's beautiful. absolutely stunning. It's sort of like the Bolivia of Central America. It's just these amazing mountains and interesting native culture, indigenous people, and it's really, really special place. But I arrived at Lake Atitlan, and then you get these big volcanoes in the background. It's absolutely stunning backdrop. Yeah, have you been to Guatemala?
No. Oh, I've been to the other side of the border in Mexico.
It's quite a lot of endemics that are shared between that side and Guatemala, as you know.
Yep. I have very few sort of new birds to see in Guatemala, but it's a country I'm very keen to go to. It just sounds wonderful and quite off the beaten path.
Really,
I love that kind of country.
There's a lot of backpackers there.
Oh yeah.
It's always been a very which is great because that you have a lot of cheap lodges
right.
and sort of cheap transport between places. So I was sort of doing it very much on the cheap, and I arrived sort of at the base of these volcanoes, and there was two big ones, and the one that I decided to climb was Volcan Toliman, and then there's Volcan Atitlan as well. If you're interested to see more stories about this, you can watch one of the tropical birding guides, Daniel. He did a virtual tour about birding in Guatemala, so you'll get lots of information there. But I decided to climb up Toliman. Guatemala was not a terribly safe country. All the shops seem to have like security guards with like sawn-off shotguns outside. It had that sort of edgy feel to it.
McDonald's has security guards with automatic weapons in case of dine and dash. that always cracks me up in Latin America.
And you'd even get like a little stationery shop, with a guy with a shotgun stood outside.
Protect the paper.
That's one of the reasons to go with a guide, with an experienced local guide who knows the security situation and knows how to keep you safe.
Yep, and what I've talked to Daniel about Guatemala, and what he says is that the stats are really driven by drug trafficking related crime, which of course it's a huge problem, and there's all kinds of tragic things happening there, but it's not something that's evenly distributed everywhere in the country. So if you do have somebody with you who knows what they're doing, you can travel there quite safely.
Yeah, I think so. But I had heard that it wasn't advised for foreigners to climb these mountains on their own because there were some instances of armed robberies. I think if you were with a local guide, they probably know the people, and they're not going to rob you. But but I was told not to.
But you were too cheap to hire a guide.
Not exactly. Too cheap and on too much of a budget, and I was like, really cannot afford this. So I went against the advice, probably quite foolishly, and I decided to climb this. And also, it's quite easy to get lost, as I found. And it's like a little maze, there's no one clear path that goes up. You start walking through these coffee plantations, and you've got no idea which way to go. So that was a big problem. For some reason, I think I was planning to leave that evening, maybe on a bus somewhere. So I was with my big backpack on the base of this mountain. I had a big piece of plastic, and I wrapped up my backpack, and I hid it in a bush.
I've done that so many times.
Have you?
The old backpack hiding maneuver.
Yeah, it's like they're not gonna, and you're thinking no one's gonna find it here, but am I gonna remember where I put it? It's like the sort of squirrel with the acorns. You're not gonna remember where you put all these damn things.
So I did this once, and I came back to find that my backpack, thankfully, was still there, but like a whole column of some sort of army ants had found it, and there were like thousands of ants in every little crevice of my bag, and I was just basically getting bit in the back for like days after that. Yep.
Brilliant. Anyway, so I sort of hid the backpack, and I started up walking through these coffee plantations, and being told that it was a bit, dangerous, whatever. I didn't want to speak to anybody. I just said, "Oh, buenos dias," and I just kept on going. I didn't want to engage anybody, so I was going through these things, and I sometimes get to a dead end and have to backtrack and go up another one, and I went up higher and higher to the very last of the coffee plantations. And then I found a little trail. Wasn't sure if it was the right one. It wasn't. And I sort of carried on walking up, and the thing got like smaller and smaller and smaller, and it just petered out in the end. Whether it was a little hunting trail or what. But this thing just came to an end, and I knew there was a trail that went up there. So I thought to myself, maybe if I just cut across bushwhack sort of. Bushwhack laterally. I'm definitely
I've been there so many times, and I've regretted it every single time, but I never seem to learn.
So,
this time it'll be different.
No, I'm pretty sure this time it won't be that
it can't be that far.
Yeah, so I started doing that, and I don't know if you experienced this when you started guiding. You've got to carry a lot of kit. You know, you've got your camera, your binoculars, and you've got like recording equipment,
playback gear, yep,
and
GPS,
and I had all this stuff, and water, and you know, everything, and I had it all on little strings around my person. Anyway, this I was kind of crawling through this undergrowth, and there were like vines coming down, and all these little strings that I had on my body, they all got like tangled up with all these vines, and I finally got so tangled that I couldn't move. And I was absolutely, I was stuck, and I was like in like a spider's web. It was. So that was pretty ridiculous. And I managed to sort of extricate myself. And then I decided that I could sort of crawl on all fours underneath this vine tangle. So I was sort of crawling underneath this tangle with all this stuff scraping my face and just got all muddy. And it was just horrendous. And it culminated in me crawling off the edge of a cliff. So it was probably 10 or 12 feet, but I sort of crawled and got stuck and tried to pull myself free, and I ended up falling down this.
How did you fall off the cliff? You were sort of so in the understory that
I don't know. I think I sort of had all the stuff tangled up, and I sort of tried to yank myself free.
Oh, and you kind of
and then just
flip around. Yeah.
And then kind of like fell down this cliff.
It also just gets you in this headspace where you're just kind of frantic to get out of a thicket.
You just got to keep going. And then I was like, just tumble down this thing. And it was bad, eh? It was like, I was just broken. I was scratched. I was exhausted. I was just covered in just dust and mud. And I was just laying there in a pile at the base of this cliff, just a broken man.
A broken, horn-guanless man who didn't even know where the trail was.
It was just horrendous. I'm telling you, it was one of my lowest moments in my birding life. Anyway, I somehow managed to just, motivate myself to get back on my feet. And then somehow I managed to find a little bit more open area. And then amazingly, I found this path. Going a decent path. It wasn't a decent path. It was a sort of fairly narrow and slippery path, but it was an obvious path going up this mountain, and I just could not believe it. It was amazing. Anyway, so going on a little bit here, but anyway, so I then started climbing, and I climbed higher and higher and higher. The town at the bottom, I think it's called San Lucas Toliman, was about 1,700 meters. And the top of this mountain was about 3,200 meters. So it's probably a 5, which is 10,500 feet, something like that.
5,000 feet elevation gain. That's a serious hike.
Yeah. I having fallen off the cliff and bushwhacked and just anyway, and I got into this beautiful montane forest, which started, not that sort of far from the top of the mountain, and I got into this beautiful cloud forest. And it was easier walking there, and I made it, and I got to the top. And actually, just before I got to the top, I heard this. I heard this croaking like a giant frog. I mean, it was just the most amazing sound, and I think it kind of rang a bell as this guan, and I just sort of slowly crept up on this thing, and there was a pair of them up in the canopy, and I managed to get like a little window. And I saw these things just sat there croaking, doing the most, otherworldly sound. And I saw these things, and I maneuvered myself. I got an amazing view. I maneuvered myself.
It was all worth it.
And I took some I took some photos. I had this little camera like that, and I was taking photos, and I got an okay photo. It wasn't a great camera, but and I got this thing, and then these things kind of flapped away. They flapped out of the canopy and they were gone. And I sat there at the top of this mountain, just absolutely triumphant. It was just
Yep, I know the
amazing.
feeling.
It was just something else, and I just felt. I think I probably burst out crying then as well. I'm a little bit of a softie, I guess, but it was just one of the most triumphant birding moments of my life, and I was so happy. And I had some. You remember that thing we were discussing last time about when it's cold and you're at high elevation and tired, anything tastes good.
Yep.
I had some little dry cheese sandwich or a couple of cheese sandwiches, and I ate these cheese sandwiches and they just tasted absolutely amazing. And I sat there victorious, and I had some water left, and I may have even taken a Coca-Cola up with me or something like that, but I had my drink and I had my sandwich and I just lay there just victorious, and I was so happy. And then I said, okay, time to go down. And I just started down, and I ran down this mountain. I was slipping and sliding, and it didn't matter. I was just on top of the world. And there was a group of people coming up. There was like 5 guys. And I just thought, oh no, bandits. And I thought, I'm going to be robbed. And they were just like young Guatemalan guys that were just hiking a mountain. They were all, hola, hola. And I ran past these guys. And I was like, hola, hola, and I just kept on going. I thought, no, and I ran all the way down this mountain, and I got down to my bag that I'd hidden, and I was all ready to put on my bag and hike down and get on a bus and continue my journey. And I put my binoculars away and my bird book, and then I was just about to put my camera away, and then I realized I'd left my camera at the top of the freaking mountain. Having taken a picture of this thing was a big thing for me, and it was a little point and shoot. Sort of, with a zoom, one of those little things. And I thought, I've got to get it. I was exhausted, and I thought, no, I've got to go back up. So having done this thing, one of the most exhausting hikes of my life, I decided to hike back up straight away. And I knew the way this time, so there was no bushwhacking, and I just ran back up. I was in good shape, but 5,000 feet up, 5,000 feet down, and then back up again. It's quite, even for a fit person, is saying something. Eh? And I just did it. I just pushed myself. Got to get it. I can't leave. I thought if I left it and hiked up tomorrow, it's going to rain. The thing's going to be ruined. So I thought, no, I've got to do it. And somehow I managed to get up this mountain again. And it's just lying there exactly where I sat down, eating my cheese sandwich. And I just picked it up and went down again. And then I met these guys on the way down. They're like, hola, hola. And
what is this guy doing?
What's the guy doing? And they said, you cannot. They were saying basically, you shouldn't go down. It's going to be dark soon. You should stay with us here on the mountain. And I was like, no, está bien. And I was running down like in the twilight.
Yep.
And I got my bag, and then I went down and found like something to eat. And that meal was one of the best of my life. It was like a little 50-cent like taco or something like that, and it was just amazing. But yeah, that is my Horn Guan story.
That's a good story. It's
and I believe you have one as well.
Well,
we might have to.
Yeah, maybe we might have to leave your number 1 and 2 for a future podcast, because this is getting long. But
1, 2, and 3.
Maybe so. These are good stories. We don't want to rush these.
Yeah. No.
But
let's say yours.
This story is doubly gripping for me, because at the moment I can't go birding anywhere, and just hearing your story and just hearing about the kind of the agony and the ecstasy of birding, it just makes me want to be doing this somewhere. It's a weird thing with birding, is it can just force you to get beyond yourself and to push past your limits. It's almost like a boot camp type thing, but then you're doing it for yourself. You're not being forced to do this by anyone else, but you're kind of learning what you're capable of. And then the actual birds are...
You've got some extra motivation, to get up there. No one's forcing you to do it, And if you were in a gym, you wouldn't put yourself through that amount of pain.
No,
on a treadmill or anything like that.
I don't even know if you would be able to really. Just maybe the most mentally tough athletes could in a gym, but the birds just kind of take you beyond yourself. So it's doubly
gold. It's like searching for gold, like a bag of gold.
It's doubly gripping to me because I can't go birding anywhere right now, and I'm just getting increasingly desperate to bird during this pandemic. But it's also gripping because I attempted and failed to see this bird in somewhat dramatic fashion. This is a long story, but I'll try to give you a relatively short version.
We've spent a lot of time together, Ken, and I've heard a lot of your stories, but I have not.
Oh, you've not heard the
so
story? Really?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Well, you referenced the fact that on the Mexican side of this bird's range, which is in Chiapas, you can see this bird sort of with the help of mules and guides. Well, this is the route that I took during a Mexico trip with a bunch of friends of mine many years ago. Well, almost 20 years ago now. But we used to do these insane road trips in Mexico where we would... I think our philosophy was basically you can bird when it's light. That means that night is the time to drive. And so we would basically bird all day somewhere. When the sun went down, we would drive for like 7 hours to get to our next morning's birding location. Wherever it was, we would just roll out of the vehicle and sleep on the ground and just wake up at dawn and go birding. They were just insanely exhausting things. And so
I wish I'd have met you earlier.
It was right at the end of one of these insane birding trips that we went down to the part of Chiapas where you can see the horned guan. I think it's a little bit more widespread in Guatemala, but it's pretty local in Mexico and pretty...
It's just right on
tough.
the edge, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's really one site where you can see it. And so this was a major thing for us because we did have to hire mules and porters and there's a little bit of a lodge up there where we stayed. So, this was major expenditure, but it's such an awesome bird that it seemed worth it. It was really the only way to have a shot to see it. Well, I think by the time we got down there, I was just absolutely exhausted and had probably the worst Montezuma's revenge of my life. And getting up to the bird's range near the top of this mountain it's a long hike. Maybe it's 10 miles or something like that. I got a couple miles
What's
down
the name of the place? Can you remember?
I think it's called Las Tuxtlas, if I remember correctly. I got a couple miles down this trail, and I just reached the point where I didn't care about anything anymore. I just wanted to sleep. And I actually just lie down on the ground, and I went to sleep. I told the guys, I'll come in the morning. Just don't wait for me. I'm just going to sleep here. And I meant that with my whole heart. I wasn't going to move. I didn't want anything. I didn't want help. I just wanted to sleep. But I guess the local guides didn't think that was a good idea, which probably wasn't. And so they came up with the solution of my riding a mule to the top of the mountain, which sounds great. So we had a couple mules to bring our baggage up the mountain, which was, luxury. So one of the mules basically, they unloaded the luggage, and I guess they put all the luggage on one poor mule. And then I got the...
It's like, what the hell?
I got the other mule to get me up the mountain. Now, this sounds pretty cushy, and sounds like a great solution. It was the best solution under the circumstances, but the problem was the saddle on the mule was a pack saddle. And pack saddles are like perfectly square, so that you can basically, pile and rope on a bunch of baggage. And so
I know what you're talking about.
I'm sitting on this square wooden box, and I'm going 8 miles up this mountain, and I already feel like I just want to die. I just want to just leave me here. Oh my goodness. It was probably, the longest, probably 2-3 hours of my life. The wooden box is just digging into the sides of my legs, cutting off my circulation. I can't feel my legs. I mean, I just arrived at the top of that mountain just feeling like a corpse. And then when we got to the top, it was kind of the same story as always. We didn't have enough food. We were hungry the whole time. Everybody was absolutely exhausted. I was the worst off at that point. Everybody was absolutely exhausted, dehydrated. We brought a sack of rice or something, but not nearly enough food. And then, even worse, we didn't have enough water. We thought there would be water up there, and there was no water. And apparently the local water was unsafe. So we would get water from a stream and then boil it. But there was it was very rudimentary. There was no way to cover the pot, and all kinds of ash and stuff would just fall into the water. And it was just smoky water. Like we're all incredibly dehydrated and thirsty, and so we're drinking this water, but it's just revolting. It just tastes like smoke extract, and it was brutal. It was brutal. And then to cap it all, I don't have the redemptive horned guan sighting to make this all worthwhile. We missed the horned guan.
No.
There was just no sign of it. I don't know what was going on. Wrong time of year or something. Not vocal. Totally missed the horned guan.
They move around with the fruiting of trees, don't they? So, I mean, it could have...
Maybe just nothing happened to be fruiting at that time.
Yeah.
So we made our way back down the mountain, slightly in better health, I guess, than when we went up. Not great.
You walked down, did you?
Oh yeah. I was doing pretty well by then. We had left our car parked with some local folks who had promised to look after it, and turns out they hadn't done a great job, because our car had been broken into and just absolutely wiped out everything inside. Like a little bit of change in a cup holder, and I mean, they'd just been through this car in detail. All of our stuff was gone. And so you mentioned going back for your camera. That reminded me of, I had a bunch of disposable cameras in the car with all these cool pictures from Mexico. And they'd all been stolen, and that was the worst loss of everything. And I didn't really care about my 30 t-shirts and stuff, but so that capped it all. It was like just illness, dehydration, smoky water, no horned guan, and we got robbed.
But it's a perfect storm of a dip.
Yep. And we forked out massive money by our standards of that time in life for all of this. Yeah. And it was still great up there. It was a beautiful place. And
you probably shared a pretty amazing experience with some of your friends.
Absolutely. Yep. No regrets. But I
would... You probably saw some of the other cool stuff up there. Wine-throated hummingbird and all those...
Quetzal. Yeah. That's amazing. But I do really want to see a horned guan at some point. And your story makes me want to see it even more.
I bet. Well, apparently you can drive to see one now. If you watch Daniel's video,
really?
He says you can just drive to this spot and walk a short distance, and then you see this thing. Wow. And there's local guides that keep an eye on them and stuff, so it's all a lot easier now than when we did it.
I have mixed feelings about that. It's great on a tour, but there was a...
Nah, you've put in the work already.
I deserve that drive through.
You deserve the payout, the easy payout.
There's these certain birds that used to have this mystique because they were just, like Colima warbler in the States. I think they say it's the only bird you can't see from a road in the States is Colima warbler.
Really? Wow.
It would be a bit disappointing if they built some big highway up into the top of Big Bend, and you could just drive up to the Colima warblers.
Yeah, that's part of it, isn't it? The walk. Everybody talks about that.
Sure. Of course, there's people who couldn't do the hike and who then the bird would be accessible to, so I get that as well.
It's true. Mm-hmm.
But, there's a mystique to things that you have to do some brutal trek to see. So I guess we'll do your top 3 in a future episode.
We planned to do 5 and we got
only
through
did
2.
That means they were really good stories.
Good stories. My wife actually said... She listened to our podcast and she said, this is amazing. You guys have got some really amazing stories. But she said, don't rush. If you don't finish your stories, just say them later. And I think that was good advice.
I think it's good advice. These are some of our best stories. So yeah, we'll I guess next time we'll do some of my top 5. We'll see how far we get.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
We'll just remind people to check out both of our virtual tours, and some of our tropical birding colleagues have some awesome virtual tours as well, like Daniel has Guatemala, and Sam's covered a bunch of different places.
For those that haven't seen this page yet, you can find these virtual tours at tropicalbirding.com/virtual-tours.
Yep, or you can just Google virtual birding tours, and I think we're the first hit on the search there as well.
Yeah. Make sure it's us you watch and not some other people that have also started doing virtual tours.
Exactly. Well, thanks for the stories, and I'll look forward to your top 3 in a future episode.
Yep. Look forward to it. Great to finish our 3rd podcast. I must say I'm really enjoying these, even if we don't have any people listening to them. I think we'll still carry on.
Absolutely, me too. We've spent a lot of time together. I've never heard that horned guan story either, so It's a good sign.
Yep.
When you're hanging out with interesting people when you've known somebody for 10 years and you've spent countless days with them and you're still hearing new good stories.
Yeah.
So
likewise.
Yep. Thanks for the stories, and thanks to everybody for listening. We will catch you next time.
See you next time.